Edition of American Warrior Radio, the place to be for news, notes, interviews, and current events for all issues military and veteran related. If you or someone you know has ever worn the uniform of the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, or National Guard or Reserves, you've come to the right place. American Warrior Radio, right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1300 WMEL, sponsored as always by AVET Project. This program is all about supporting our troops and their families, both past and present. So please get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, maybe a pen and pencil to jot down a note or two, because Glenn and I are always efforting to bring you good information that you can use. With that said, let's roll down the runway and get this show off the road. My name is Garren Cohn. I'm the founder of AVET Project, an Air Force veteran, a retired legal advocate for veteran, but as you all know, I never fly through the airwaves alone.
Good morning, I'm Glenn McGuffey, your Brevard County Veteran Service Office Supervisor, and we've got a very special program for you today.
Yes, we do.
And I have to mention, because I'm retired Air Force, that we have a whole house full of Air Force people today.
Go Big Blue.
And we've got some really very special guests to talk about the Honor Flight program. You may not even know what that is, but when you get through today, you'll find out. And I'm going to throw the honor for the introductions over to Garren.
You know, it's my pleasure, Glenn. Joining us today on American Warrior Radio, we have two distinguished gentlemen. Retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Bill Welser III and Dale Chellis, both of whom have taken leadership positions with Space Coast Honor Flight. Say hello, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Before we get into the details of what Honor Flight mission is, would you gentlemen give our audience a little background of yourselves, beginning with you, General?
Sure, I'd be honored to. And thank you very much for having us here today. This is a great opportunity for us to let the arid folks out there not only know in Brevard County, but the rest of the world what Honor Flight is all about. But yes, I started as a lieutenant maintenance officer in the Air Force back in 1971, served 35 years. Was fortunate to have a lot of great jobs, traveled to a lot of different places around our country and around our world, and was honored to serve our country in the United States Air Force. So, you know, this program is not about me, though. It really is about our veterans, and so I'll keep it short and pass it on to Dale.
Well, you don't need to do that, though, because I want the folks out there in Radioland to know and understand a little bit more about the folks that are getting involved in Honor Flight and their background and why they have a passion to do this. You're being very modest. You're a Lieutenant General. You retired after you said 35 years. Give the audience a little thumbnail sketch of some of the things that you did while you were in service.
Sure. I started out as a maintenance officer. Had a couple assignments doing that. A lot of different airplanes, F4, C5. Back in the old days, recips. Did several of those. Had a great time out on the West Coast in Thailand, and then went to pilot training. After that, got to serve in flying C-141s and then the C5. And then fortunate to rise through the ranks, become a wing commander, go off and do things like be the director of operations for Training Command, where I got to fly 21 different airplanes, which you know, very few people get that opportunity. So very fortunate. Then just before 9/11, ended up at the
This is important, folks. Listen up.
Ended up at the United States Transportation Command about 5 weeks before 9/11, and was responsible for the movement of all trucks, trains, buses, and planes throughout the world, and all the troops for all the services in that joint assignment.
The operative word there is all.
Yeah, and so when 9/11 hit, I was actually in California at Travis Air Force Base, and
Your home.
Your home, Garren, where you served.
Stationed there.
And was very fortunate to be able to fly back to Scott that day. In fact, we were one of 3 airplanes airborne. As you recall, they grounded all the airplanes, and so we had.
And you were still in the air.
We got permission from the White House to fly back to Illinois, where I had to go back to work. So we managed that for 2 years, and then I was fortunate enough to be promoted and command 18th Air Force, which is the numbered Air Force that's responsible for all air mobility assets around the world.
Well, I think I speak for everybody, certainly Glenn, I, and our producer and engineer. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Now, Dale, you've got a wonderful past, too. You are a blue suiter as well.
Air Force, 1961 and 1973, not quite as illustrious as Bill's, but I was a cryptographer.
What's a cryptographer?
Well, we were responsible for maintaining the security of classified communications. Back in those days, we were still using World War II technology as far as the crypto machines go, but we maintained the security of the communications among all of the military organizations as well as NATO forces. And at the end of my career, I ended up at a base in Buckley Field in Colorado, and we were doing defense satellite systems. So it spanned 12 years. I am not a Vietnam veteran. I'm a Vietnam era veteran, and went through the trials and tribulations of what Vietnam military guys did during Vietnam.
Dale, our hats off to you, and thank you for your service to our country as well. Really appreciate that. General, what got you interested in taking a leadership role in honor flight? And we'll get to, maybe we should just stop here and define what is honor flight, guys.
That'd be great. Honor flight is a program, and it's a national program, and Dale can give you some more of the history of it because he started out with them in Chicago. My beginning was actually here in Brevard County. But 2 years ago, I went to the World War II Memorial with my father and father-in-law, both World War II veterans. And I was astounded at the reaction that the people to their service. We had people that wanted to have pictures taken with them. They wanted their autographs. My father-in-law was a...
with the vets, as you're wheeling them around for monuments.
We were walking around in their case, but my father-in-law was a POW, baton survivor, and 4.5 years in a prisoner of war camp, and so it was quite an emotional event for my entire family. All my 4 kids who've served in the military, as long as my grandchildren were there, and so I knew what it meant to us, when I got back and read about the fact that there had been a flight in October that I wasn't able to attend, that I needed to get involved, and so I got involved in the next June flight, and through some transitions of people needing to depart and others wanting to join the program, I was asked to join the board, and from there this year we decided to go beyond the 1 trip in 2010. We had 3 trips in 2011, and to form a board and a group of volunteers this year that could do 7 trips. And so,
impressive.
We found folks like Dale.
Ambitious.
Ambitious. Folks like Dale and myself that said we would do this to take forth and try to move about 200 veterans to the memorial this year. And we got a dedicated group of volunteers, and we thank them. But so that's how I got involved in it.
That's wonderful. And Dale, tell us a little bit about what made you want to get involved with the Honor Flight mission.
Well, I was in Chicago, and I came across an editorial written by Bert Constable that kind of outlined what Honor Flight Chicago had just started, and they needed some help with funding for their inaugural flight, and so I made a couple phone calls and finally got together with the people that were running Honor Flight Chicago, and they invited me on the board.
Now you're talking about their first flight out of
Their
Chicago.
first flight, yes.
Impressive.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that once I became involved, once I was on the first flight and saw exactly what Honor Flight was doing, you get hooked.
Yeah.
It's one of these. It's just a kind of one of these moment things. And I've also had the pleasure of meeting the founder of Honor Flight, a gentleman by the name of Earl Morse. He started Honor Flight as a result of his dad, was a World War II veteran, and once they opened the memorial, his dad said, "You know, I'd really like to go see that." Well, Earl had an airplane, and he was a pilot, and so he took his dad and one of his buddies to D.C. to the memorial. And when his dad and his buddies came back home to Springfield, Ohio, they started talking to other World War II vets, and these guys said, "That'd be a great idea. I'd love to make that trip." And so, as a result, Earl gathered up some of his pilot buddies, and the first official Honor Flight trip consisted of 6 airplanes and 12 vets.
Wow.
And it now is, as a result of that genesis of that program, there are now about 115 chapters nationwide, pardon me, and they have flown 85,000 World War II vets to the memorial in D.C. And I tell you folks, once you make the trip, you will make more trips. It's just one of these things that you sit and you talk to these men and women that have gone through what they have gone through during the war, and it's an amazing experience.
So, gentlemen, what's the main purpose? Okay, we're getting World War II vets up there to see their monument because they were one of the last ones to get a monument dedicated to them at the mall.
And Garren, that's a really important point to make, and why this is so important is that most of the veterans, World War II veterans, came back from the war, got married, went out and had families, and went to work to rebuild our country and rebuild the world, basically. And by the time the memorial was built in 2004, most of them had retired or would not have means or ability to be able to make these trips. And so everyone on our staff is a volunteer. Everyone has gotten hooked. When you go out on one of these trips, you will become hooked and you'll become a volunteer. But So we give these folks, and when we talk to them on the phone, they cannot believe that someone really wants to give a free trip to Washington, D.C. So for all the World War II veterans out there that have yet to sign up, we'd like you to sign up for a free trip to Washington, D.C. to honor your service that made our freedoms today possible. That is the bottom line.
That sounds like a heck of a mission.
Oh, absolutely, and I've often wondered why the last monument that we erected in Washington, D.C. was for the World War II veterans. That seemed backwards to me, but be that as it may, could you describe the program a little bit? I understand that the honor flight starts at dark 30 in the morning and goes from there, and it's a big full day.
Well, I will tell you that the ones that don't sleep on the trip are the veterans. So everybody that worries about how long the day is, they're the ones that are wired for the entire day. It does start early. We do a one-day trip because it's less expensive for us, and it's also, in the long term, less tiring on the veterans if you try to stretch it across 2 days. Some hubs do that, and it is more difficult to do that, and it costs much more.
Logistically, sure.
Yeah, but we do 25 veterans. We keep it small and personal. 25 veterans, 25 Guardian escorts, and we start at about anywhere from about 4 to 4:30 in the morning, and we get home at about 11:30 at night. And so we do a bus ride into Orlando, a fly by airline into Baltimore, a bus ride down to Washington, D.C., and we go see the World War II, Korean, Vietnam memorials. We go see the changing of the guard at Arlington Cemetery. We stop by Iwo Jima, the Air Force Memorial if there's time, and the Women's Memorial, depending on whether we have any World War II vets on the flight that are women, which we have had. We've had 8 women so far go with us on trips in the last year.
And these ladies are terrific.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and the overall day. I mean, when you get off the airplane in Baltimore, and there are several hundred people, volunteers and other passengers at the gates, applauding and shaking hands and taking pictures of our World War II vets. If there's a tear not in your eye, then there's something wrong with you as an American.
Well, I want to interject here. You mentioned something that I think our audience really needs to hear, and we'll talk about the national audience in a moment. But here on the Space Coast, how many did you say are eligible veterans, World War II vets, Dale?
Well, according to the demographic information we got, there's about 9,500 to 9,700 World War II vets in Brevard County alone, which seems to be a tremendous number. But when you start looking at the fact that a lot of the vets come down here because, number one, the weather, number two, the access to some of the military installations, particularly Patrick, it makes sense. And one of our problems is locating these people.
And that's one of the reasons that you want to do these outreaches, is to make sure that these folks know it's available.
Precisely.
And it's one of our most favorite words.
It's absolutely free for the veteran.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it's a couple of conversations I've had. People mention, well, what's the catch? And because you say taking veterans to World War II Memorial for free, the perception now, unfortunately, part of our society has turned a little bit cynical, and they say, well, there's got to be a catch here somewhere. And trust us, there is absolutely no catch. We take the World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. at absolutely no charge to them.
For the veterans. Now, the guardians that you mentioned that will accompany each veteran, they don't have to be a relative.
No, in fact, we have a list of people that are willing to pay, and we charge $400, which covers the airline, food, and bus transportation on the trip. And they pay for that out of their own pocket. We've had, over the past year, an increase in the number of family members that do want to accompany the World War II veterans. For example, the last trip we had 10. The trip that I've just set up.
Actual family members of the World War II vets.
Family members of the World War II vets. The next trip, there's actually 13. So we've got quite a few that are willing to pay the $400 and go along as guardians.
It's like a double blessing.
And that $400 is, in fact, tax deductible. So the recommendation is that you discuss that with your CPA and your tax advisors.
And that's an important point to make. A 501c3, you're a nonprofit. Nobody's making a paycheck here. This is a volunteer effort.
Precisely.
Yeah, every one of us is a volunteer, and we rely on volunteers and donations from the public.
And what airlines are you using for this?
Well, we use Southwest and AirTran so far are the ones that we're using here in this hub, and they've been very, very supportive. I mean, it's you know, the rule line up by your number at South. We don't do that. We line up 2 by 2. We take the veteran and the guardian, and they go on the airplane together. Southwest has been extraordinary in allowing us to do that, and we're about to take a couple AirTran flights. We look for a window in D.C. of 7.5 to 9 hours, because if we're going to go from Baltimore down to Washington and back again, and we've got and a meal is in there, and then all the memorials that we want to go see, we need that block of time. So we are shifting between Southwest and AirTran to make that block of time available.
And with the increased interest in other family members going, what would be like the maximum for a flight then?
We take 56. We take a staff of 6. One of those is a medical person, and 25
That's good
and
to
25
know.
guardians. So you know, we limit it to 56. We have done one trip last June. We took 2 buses. It's not quite as personal. We try to keep it very personal, and this has been a magic trip for us that works that way, and so we've kept it to that level.
And 56 people fit on one bus. So.
That's key. And Southwest and AirTran, and Southwest even on a national basis donate a bunch of tickets to Honor Flight.
They have done an amazing job. I mean,
So hats off.
The inaugural flight in Chicago, Southwest donated 80 seats for the World War II vets, and we had the guardians that paid their own way and staff members. But Southwest has been extremely supportive, and hats off to those folks.
Yeah, 25 of our veterans that traveled on our very first trip. In fact, we were the first trip of the nation to travel this year, back on the 24th of March. And all 25 of those veterans tickets were covered by Southwest.
So folks, when you're making your travel arrangements, keep that in mind. You want to support those that support our vets. And
Absolutely.
Southwest has certainly stepped up, and hopefully AirTrans will
Well,
follow suit.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the AirTran is soon to become a part of, or they are a part of, soon to change their name over to Southwest. So,
Okay, so one big happy family.
one big happy family.
You know, we've got listeners out there, not just here on the Space Coast, but from Maine to Texas, California to Afghanistan. What if somebody is hearing this program online at 1300WMEL.com and they want to get involved? They either have somebody that they know or maybe a relative that's a World War II vet. Can they find this information and get plugged in on their?
Absolutely. There is a national website, honorflight.org. And
Honorflight.org.
And it lists all of the hubs and all the contact information. And actually, you'll also see some additional background information on the organization.
As a point also that you know, we were covering 3 counties at one time, and we were pulling people all the way from the west coast of Florida that have actually come and traveled with us here out of Melbourne. Orlando has now started a hub, and has the villages just north of there, so that there are 2 additional. Plus Vero Beach and Daytona have taken trips on their own that are similar to Honor Flight. They just don't have hubs there.
Okay, but so you've got an operation right here on the Space Coast, and now one in Orlando as well.
And the villages.
And the villages.
And the villages.
Well, we know the villages is a major retirement community, so that makes sense.
So we challenge all of our friends in Orlando and the villages that are also retired military to get out there and help those hubs, because they are starting and they're having the same growing pains that we had a year and a half ago.
Well, Glenn, how many veterans do we have in Brevard County?
Well, in round figures, we've got 72,000, and as Dale was pointing out, Florida in general and us in specific mirror those demographics. Is home to the oldest, most severely service-connected disabled population in America, and we're one of the few states that continues to grow in veteran population versus a net loss each year. So I think there's at least a few years more of a future for the World War II trips, and then I understand you gentlemen are planning to shift to the next era of our combat warriors.
I'll let Dale address that after I mention something. World War II veterans, we have World War II veterans that are younger than 85 years old, but they lied to go defend their country. I mean, they exist. And
16, 17 years old.
They did. We had one guy that was 15 years old on Iwo Jima at the last trip.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, they did that, and we're proud, and that's why they're called the greatest generation. But, you know, we had the last trip, we went on that day. It was the 96th birthday of one of our veterans, and so people
96 years old, folks,
96.
and he's jumping on a plane for a one-day there and back trip to visit World War II monument.
This next trip that goes out next week, we have 2 that are 95 and 3 that are 94 going with us, and I will tell you, people worry about age and they worry about disability. We will take anyone that is willing to go with us. We had an individual that is severely handicapped that's going with us on our next trip. And if you're willing to go with us, we're willing to take a chance and take you with us.
Well, before we run out of time, and I don't want to cut you short here, but how does somebody get involved on a local level to either financially support this endeavor or become a volunteer, an escort, or you said guardian?
Right, the guardians. I think the most efficient way is to go on the website, which is www.spacecoasthonorflight.org. All of the information is there. All of the applications are there. Follow the instructions, fill out the application, and mail it in.
Okay, so mention that website again.
It's spacecoast.org, www.spacecoasthonorflight.org.
Spacecoasthonorflight.org.
And we also have an 800 number, which is 888-750-2522.
And you mentioned, General, you've got one coming up shortly here.
We have one that is going out next Saturday, and we have our schedule published in the paper, and it's on our website. If you want to come say hi to your veterans, you want to wish them off, coming on at 4:30 next Saturday morning at the Wickham Senior Center, and you'll get to see one firsthand.
This is important, folks. If you can't make it, or if you can't donate, then at least get out there and say hello and thank these folks for their dedication to this country and service to our country. I also want to get a shout out to Master Sergeant Dennis and his wife Melissa Hayes from Patrick Air Force Base, who are involved with it. Great folks, and they helped to pull this all together, and we appreciate you joining us today. One more time, what's the web address?
www.spacecoasthonorflight.org.
And again, there's some tax deductibility to any donations. Just consult your tax advisor.
Yes, by all means.
And if anybody out there wants to be the one that has the next video dedicated, get a hold of us, $500, and you can dedicate the next video to a family member.
Folks, there's lots of opportunity here.
That'd be lasting. I know that my father-in-law has a video of the last mission that he was on in World War II, and it's just mind-blowing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've been speaking with General Bill Welser and Dale Chellis of Space Coast Honor Flight. Stick with us here on American Warrior Radio. We will be back in just a moment with the second half of today's episode. Don't go anywhere.